Hi everyone, I'm Kurt VanderWaal from Andrews University in the School of Social Work, and Karl Bailey, my colleague from the School of Behavioral and Social Sciences. And together we have been working and just concluded work on a pretty large study for the state of Michigan. So some of us don't always do church research. We do stuff in the community as well, and this was a contract that came to us from the community. So this is about kids and their ability to learn and why it's important for them to learn. And we know a few things. We know that the first years of a kid's life are really important for preparing them for learning. And the earlier that you can help to prepare those kids for learning, the better off those kids are going to be in terms of success. Everything from their ability to understand language, their ability to have an expansive vocabulary, their ability to learn to read, all of those things happen early on in their lives. And the best predictor of kids being able to read and their interest in reading is to have the parents engage with them. So it's really important that parents are engaged at a very early age. And the folks in the state of Michigan, as well as places around the United States, have people and organizations that are a part of larger entities that are doing this all the time, trying to help parents learn how to read to their kids and how to help them engage in all kinds of ways with early learning. One of the things that we're concerned about is that the more advantages that you have socioeconomically, the more likely you are to have successful kids. And the less socioeconomic economic advantages you have, the less likely kids are to be able to have larger vocabularies, access to books and materials and other resources, and it makes it that they're oftentimes at a disadvantage. So that's one of the foci of these organizations, is to say, how do we get these resources into their hands? In Michigan, we know that 69% of students fall short of fourth grade reading proficiency. That's a pretty high rate. We also know that early interventions can help improve literacy levels. So essentially, earlier, the better. Now, this study started out in 2024 when a local school district near Berrien Springs, or in Berrien Springs, received a State of Michigan grant to coordinate a statewide early literacy media campaign across the entire state of Michigan. And it had 4 major goals. The first goal is to increase understanding of the importance of reading, talking, and singing to people, particularly children. Second, to increase the time spent reading, talking, and singing. Third, to increase the awareness of the availability of resources for after school, before, during, after school literacy programs. And fourth, to increase the awareness and participation in what are called Great Start collaboratives and family coalitions. These are the kinds of things that are in every county of the state of Michigan. So we had a survey, 7 questions about belief about early learning and its importance, 4 questions about things you do or behaviors that relate to how often you sing and read and the barriers to reading. Third, where do you go for information? That had 5 questions, programs and services. And then the last had 6 demographic questions. We did our sampling as convenience sampling. Basically, we had no control at Andrews University about any of the survey data collection. This was done by sharing survey links across emails and social media. And one of the challenges that we really came across was when we were doing this data collection, when you use Facebook and other kinds of things and don't have proper controls on the way that the data is being collected, you can have bots go in and answer the questions as well. And so Karl provided an invaluable service doing cleaning and other sorts of things so that we could tell the difference between real people and the bots. So this was shared with parents and guardians who had a child or children ages 0 to 10, resided in Michigan, and had the ability to complete the survey using a phone or a computer. We did 2 waves of data collection, a pre and a post. Pre-test, first wave of data was October 4 to November 4 in 2024, and then wave 2 happened roughly the same time in October, ended in October of 25. There was then a media campaign that was conducted, and that was paid for out of this grant but it was conducted by a media consulting firm that does this stuff all the time called Good Marketing. And they did 2 phases or 2 waves, one from April 7 to May 11, and then another one from June 21 to August 31, both in 2025. So we collected our data before the media campaign, and then we collected the data immediately after the media campaign. Wave 1 sample size had approximately 4,200 parents, and our Wave 2 sample size had approximately 1,000 parents. All 83 counties in Michigan were represented. Now, this is where things become interesting, so pay attention to these differences because they will come back to haunt us later. First of all, gender, you can see Wave 1, about 75% female, 90% female in Wave 2. Race and ethnicity, Wave 1, 76% white, Wave 2, 84% white. Primary role, Wave 1, 83% were parents, Wave 2, 93% parents. Wave 1 for the highest grade completed had about 52% college graduates. Wave 2 had, no, I'm sorry, I don't have the college graduates. There were higher rates of college graduates. 20%, 7%, some college. Sorry, I dropped out the college graduates. But know that the second wave had a higher proportion of college graduates. And then finally, qualify for government assistance. In the first wave, 63% qualified for government assistance, whereas in the second wave, 45%. Now, the reason why this is important is that every single one of those categories trends toward, in Wave 2, people who are more likely to be literate and using services and reading to their children more likely. So essentially, women, whites, high parents, and higher the grade you completed and the lower qualifying for government assistance all have higher rates of reading. Okay, now just so you know what the media campaign looked like, this was a pretty big media campaign across the state. And as you can see, there were print materials, there were social media materials on Facebook and on Instagram, there were digital displays of various sorts. We had big billboards that had signs around the state that showed these messages. We had streaming and broadcast TV. So all kinds of ways in which this message was being broadcast across the entire state of Michigan. In fact, even the Detroit Lions football team did some promos for this project. All right, Carl, talk us through the data.
Okay, so I'm going to walk us through the data. You're going to be unsurprised given what Kurt told you about the demographics, and then we'll help you feel better after that. So here we go. So let's just highlight, basically I'm going to highlight some key findings, and then the similar items are about the same. So remember that our first goal was to increase understanding of the importance of reading, singing, using language with children. For statements like the more I talk, read, or sing to my child, the stronger our connection will be, an increase of 10%. For statements like my child enjoys participating in these kinds of reading programs, an increase of 9%. And then this last one where it goes down, that's good, right? So when my child goes to school, the teacher will teach everything my child needs to know. When you have a higher percentage of that, that's the parent saying, I don't feel that I have agency in this. Right? The teacher needs to have all the agency. So when that goes down, so it goes down here, 18%, right? When that goes down, that's a good number. That's people in the second wave saying, I feel like I have agency. For the second goal, increasing the time spent reading, singing, and talking with their children, we see increases here as well. So 15% increase in daily reading, a 13% increase in daily singing or use of music, right? So good increases in the behavior as well. When it comes to awareness of the programs that can support and facilitate this, increases here across the board, increases in awareness of school programs, awareness of book and literacy programs, awareness of play groups, which are quite common in these different county groups. My children went to those when they were small. Awareness of community programs themselves, awareness of parent education programs increases in all of these things. And of course, lastly, for a particular initiative that's in each county called the Great Start Collaborative, for that particular initiative, we also saw some increases, small, but increases in awareness of participation. So awareness of heard of, and then a very small increase in participation in these collaboratives. Right? So now at this point, you should be going, well, that's all good, but you just told us that the demographics were going to go in this direction anyway. Okay, so how can we feel better about this? Kurt will help you feel better.
All right, I'm going to do my best. So there was data that was being collected not just by us as Wave 1 and Wave 2. The good marketing folks were also collecting data. So you can see some of their basic data here. They had an estimated 3.9 million people across the state, and they had ways of measuring all of this. I won't go into how the metrics were collected. 127 million total impressions, which meant that people at least had gone past and it had floated past them in some way. Estimated frequency, 22 times that people in some way or another had interacted with these messages. Total clicks to the website, which is what they were really trying to do, is drive people to the website. 253,000 people actually went to that website that gave them resources. Website users, there were about 190,000 during that period of time when they were doing the media campaign. And then 6.6 thousand roughly people downloaded some of the resources and actually made use of them. So those are all good things. And we're actually higher than the projections that they made for what their goals were. And so we asked a couple of questions that we thought were kind of helpful to understand whether or not people actually were paying attention. So in the last 4 months or so, do you remember any billboards, social media, or other ads that talked about this? And so in our Wave 2 only group, they said about 48% of them said, yes, we do. And of those people who said yes, we followed up and asked them, what changes did you make in your behavior? And you can see if you look at the very bottom, for instance, over 52% said if we saw it, we became more mindful and consistent. About 38% said they increased the amount of time that they talked, read, or sang to their children. 37% said they increased their pre-reading activities, and 33% said they increased the frequency of talking, reading, and singing. So these are all good things, and we feel good about knowing that of the people who saw these messages who actually contributed to our survey, that those things were going on. A couple of other quick questions. Thinking about talk, reading, and singing in a new way. TRS is talking, reading, singing. If you add up the strongly agrees and the agrees, you get about 77%. If you add up the ads inspired me to learn more, that's about 80%. So those are also good things that of those people who are paying attention, things were going in the right direction. So the good news, statistically significant improvements were seen across all 4 major goals, and some of them were quite not, we would even say not just statistically significant, but clinically significant. I mean, oftentimes jumps of 15 and 20%. That shows clear growth in parental beliefs, behaviors, increased program awareness, slight improvements in community participation. And we also know that those who saw the ads made important changes to their behaviors. Whole sample of the people that were in the Wave 2 believe the ads helped them to consider talking, reading, singing in a new way, wish to learn more. However, the concern is because Wave 2 had more women, more parents, more highly educated respondents, fewer families receiving government assistance, and a higher percentage of white participants. All of those groups historically demonstrate stronger literacy beliefs, higher awareness, and more consistent talking, reading, singing engagement. So while we are happy about those significant increases, we also wrote all kinds of cautions into our reports to basically say, look, folks, we're excited about this. We know that it did a good job, but also really be cautious about interpreting these findings as a major win, knowing that this was a different sample in some ways than the first sample. So conclusions, findings across the 5 goals suggest some encouraging progress. Although the surveys cannot determine the exact cause of the improvements, we at least know that the media campaign appeared to play some meaningful role, and especially given the substantial portion of caregivers who reported changing their behaviors after seeing the ads, were really encouraged by that behavior. And then at the same time, knowing that these demographic differences really highlight the need that we have to pay attention to the most vulnerable groups that are least likely to be using these services. I guess I'm about done. And so we need to spend more time trying to reach the hardest to reach groups, right? And those are all of the groups that we didn't get to see as much of in the survey responses. So finally, we know that we're moving in a positive direction, but we need to continue more efforts toward culturally sponsored programming, more accessible literacy supports, and more targeted outreach to underserved groups. And indeed, the state of Michigan is going to be putting more money into a next phase because they were so encouraged by the first phase. So we're pleased about that. Thank you very much.